Hello, and welcome to this 26th video in the series Reflections on the Bhagavad Gita. In this particular series, we are looking at chapter 16, verses 1, 2, and 3, sometimes called the godly qualities or the spiritual qualities. If this is your first one that you're looking at in the series, I suggest that you take a look at the introductory video. It's the first one in the list. It says introduction on it. Can't miss it. If this is not the first time, you know that we always begin from rest, from a chance to kind of break from the day's activities. When I say the day, this one here I happen to be doing in the morning, but from the moment that we get up, we're running at 90, 100, 120 miles an hour, and that's before we've even had the coffee. So right now, there's nothing to do. There literally is nothing to do. Just be here. I am using a exercise from the School of Practical Philosophy. You can use whatever method you have. If it's just your first introduction to just doing nothing, welcome. It's refreshing. So just to start, just closing the eyes is good. Helps get rid of some of the distractions out there. And just sit quietly and be aware of your surroundings. Be aware that you're sitting in a chair and that there's sounds about. Just stop and listen. Good. Now, to practice this properly, minimally, there should be a couple of 2 to 3 minutes, 4 to 5 even better. But again, any little break in there is of use. Excuse me. Okay. Now, we are in verse 3. And just as a reminder, verse 3 began energy, forgiveness, fortitude, and the word we are looking at today is purity. Now, if you've taken a look at that YouTube list here, you might see something, in fact, you might see 2 videos. It was called Purity of Heart and Purity of Being. And you could say, well, we kind of covered that subject, didn't we? And so the first thing I'd like to do here is let's just go with both the words and the commentary. As I mentioned, I use the version of the Gita with Shankaracharya's commentary in it, because that can give us an indication of why something that seems so similar is being seemingly repeated here. So we're going to go back to verse 1, and I'm just going to read the commentary because it actually the commentary begins with purity of heart. That was what we looked at, the 2 videos of purity of heart and purity of being. Okay, and Shankaracharya's commentary is as follows. Purity of heart, for that phrase. Purity of the antakarana. Now that is sometimes translated as inner organ of mind, your inner being. And that goes along with the sense of how that was used in the first verse. So purity of all that's inner, we certainly cover that well with purity of the heart being more inner, more of your inner being, okay? So purity of the inner being, that is abandonment of deception, dissimulation, falsehood, and the like in all transactions. That is to say, transacting business in perfect honesty. And as I said, we took 2 videos to cover that because we're not just talking about going to the grocery store. We're talking with transactions, the business of life. We talked about the beauty of having somebody conducting their business of life in perfect honesty, and wouldn't we like to have, our dealings with such people. Now, we go to verse 3 here, which, as I said, energy, forgiveness, fortitude, purity, okay? And after fortitude here, purity, okay? Of the two sorts, the external and the internal, the one being accomplished by means of earth and water, the other consisting in the taintlessness of mind and heart, in freedom from impurities such as deception and passion. So the distinction that is being made here is what we looked at in those first two videos, purity of heart and being. That's the inner way. And in fact, since that was actually sattva samsud here, sattva, your being joined with, we spent a lot of time talking about how it was a part of you, okay? And that's the internal. So right away, just from the commentary, we get a sense that we're not talking necessarily about the internal being, but about the external, if you will. And with that, pardon me with all my papers here, with that, we're going to go to, and as I say, I save on needing a editing program, we're going to go to purity as given here, okay? And this purity, saucham, or saucha, in the pure form of the word, without being in a sentence and everything needed around that, saucha is cleanliness, purity, purification, purity of mind, integrity, honesty, especially in money matters, self-purification. And as we've said before, these words have roots, and they stem from something. When we look at the word, we're looking at the leaf. So suchi is yet deeper into this word, and we find it to be given in definition as shining, glowing, gleaming, radiant, bright, brilliantly white, clear, clean, pure. The list goes on for quite a bit, but I think we get the hint of it here, and I think we'll certainly pick some of those words and take a look at them. And finally, at the root of it all is what we call the root of the verb here. The root of all of these are, all of the roots are verbs, they're actions. And we've talked about the creation being nothing but activity or action. So in order to live in the creation and walk and talk and drive and eat and drink, I mean, these are all verbs, and the same holds true in the Sanskrit. So the root of this that we're talking about is such, and that is given as to shine, flame, gleam, glow, burn, be sorrowful or afflicted, grieve, bewail and lament, interesting set of things coming in here, to be absorbed in deep meditation, to be bright and pure. So that gives this kind of, I always think of, when you go to a website, there's the tag of, there's the cloud tag, all of these things that if you go to this website, and of course if they're bigger, that means that there's more on that subject. So kind of think of this as the cloud tag around purity. Now, we've already been given in the indication of the commentary a distinction between what we looked at in those first two videos back in verse 1 as, again, being part and parcel of your being, a kind of an inner purity. It really is. This was an inner purity that we spent two videos on. We could have probably spent a lot more on. Now here we are talking about almost an external purity, and again, I think Shankaracharya's commentary, accomplished with earth and water. Clearly in the wonderful year of 2020, when COVID-19 is, one of the main subjects, it depends upon the grocery store that you go into. I know Wegmans up here in the Northeast, every customer that comes in, they got the spray bottles out and are cleaning off the place where the belt where you put your groceries, and cleaning all sorts of things, and there's plastic, and that is certainly a form of outer cleanliness. Again, I'm going to kind of concentrate on cleanliness here because that gives you a better sense of what we mean by this purity versus the other purity. And one of the things that might have you scratching your head right now is not only in those two videos about purity of being and purity of heart, but in many others, I refer to Jesus' comment about it's what comes out of you that defiles you, not what goes in. And in fact, we read that whole quote a few videos ago. And so are we saying, well, maybe that's not the case? And again, as always, said it just I think the video before about in talk about energy and power. There's always a specific and a universal. Now, Jesus spent a lot of time trying to get the scribes and the Pharisees and the leaders to not solely concentrate on the external, on how it looked. And again, there's stuff that we've read about that. And it doesn't mean that you don't do these things. It just means that if you want to have a human being who is honest, who is displaying these qualities of pureness of being and compassion and everything that we've talked about, it needs to come from within. In one way, I'm going to say in one way because I'm going to have to give you a but after this. In one way, it must come from within, because that's the way it works. However, it doesn't mean, you say, well, okay, well, if it's not from within, and we've been talking about impurities in the heart, well, then how, you're stuck, right? If you didn't. If you're not at that state, how do you get to the other state? And there's some indication of that in this, that yes, although it comes from within, and people who are pure and graceful, that shines out, just like people who are malicious and hateful, that shines out. So can the mind and heart be lifted up and be cleansed, because this external cleansing is what we're talking about. And in fact, I believe that I looked at the Sargent version of the Gita, which is the one that is really good for the grammar of it and getting you in the right place. And when we looked at purity of being and purity of heart, literally it is that. In fact, the Sargent version mentions being and heart, very inner. The one that we're looking at now, purity, in the Sargent version of the Gita, I dropped it off someplace. Oh, wait, it's right here. So this is the Gita, the Sargent version of it, and let me just pick that here. This is much more of a breakdown. It's a scholarly work, I guess you can call it that. And here, when he says purity, saucham, cleanliness of mind and body. So we're a bit more external, okay? You need one of those people where you just hand the book off to the side and you've got all those people there. Now, it's all connected, Your heart, your mind, your body, everything around you, it's all one. However, there's different laws for each of them, and there's different workings. And as we've said, these bodies are dead as a doornail, and it's only through the consciousness and the life force, if you will, that they appear to be, all this talking and moving and stuff like that. But this whatever, I don't know what the price is, $2.68 worth of chemicals is perfectly dead. But nevertheless, so you're not going to get anything out of the body. It's in hearing things. It's in seeing things. It is being surrounded by people who, as it will, are already at the state that you're desiring to get to. I mean, if I were, and I always think of, I'll talk from my own experience in computers, but nearly every time when a whole bunch of computer programmers go to lunch, what do? They talk about the code and what to do. And, by being in that company, if you haven't already learned it in class, you'll pick up. You just pick that up from being in that company. Now, the difficulty is finding good company who are working towards honesty and truthfulness and compassion and harmlessness is it's not the average lunchtime conversation. It's not the average bar time conversation. And quite frankly, if I were to walk into a bar, now of course in Pennsylvania right now you're not allowed to sit at the bar because 6 feet in distancing, but let's just say 2019 I were to walk into a bar, I generally find that the level of conversation turns rather hateful and nasty pretty early on, just the way that it is, and that's because that's what's being practiced. So how do we get the outer to come in and cleanse the inner a bit? Well, one is that one looks for somebody who is in this sort of state. Now, very fortunately, I think even more fortunately now in 2020 than even 50 years ago, when people go, oh yeah, that was back in the hippie generation. Yeah, I think now we have more access to teachers. I mean, you just go out there and search for spiritual teachers, and there are tons out there who are giving their advice. And, you can pick that up. And that would be a way of, through hearing, to get a little bit of this cleansing, this purity going. Now, the other way to do that is to be much like if you were learning French or Spanish. Not only do you read or take the class or who's a Rosetta Stone and what have you, but really the best way is watch French TV or Spanish TV, read the newspapers, listen to it. There's this need to be immersed in the sight, in the sound, in the taste, of the smell, of all of your senses. This is all the outer world. But that outer world, you need a marination, right? I mean, some people complain. I've said I'm vegetarian, and tofu's part of it, and people say, yeah, tofu's got nothing. Well, yeah, it doesn't. It's pretty bland, but you marinate it. And you marinate. I mean, I cook meat for people, and not everybody in the household is a vegetarian, but you kind of need this immersion in a purification ritual. I just wanted to go back here and see. It says purification. I'm just going to go back and read a few more words here. Pure in a ceremonial sense, one who has acquitted himself of or discharged a duty, purification. So, some of the rituals of the church are just that. I mean, even baptism, if you look upon baptism, and again, I can only speak from the Catholic Church, as washing away of original sin, you kind of get this idea. Now, again, symbolically washing away, but this idea of a outer cleansing, a symbolic cleansing, helping to clear the inner. So much as in all these past videos, I've taken a lot of time on you need the heart to be clear and not filled with, as I call it, the black lung disease, all those little bits of coal that darken your heart, okay? But, if you say, well, here's the state that I'm in, is there any hope? Well, yeah, the hope is that, and the answer is, change the company that you're hanging out with. And I don't just mean who you're hanging out at the bar with. You wonder, we were just at the beach a few weeks ago. Trust me, I didn't take this to the beach, okay? I took, some 25-cent book that I found at the thrift store that looked like a good thriller. Turned out to be a good thriller, and it's just the perfect thing. So, yeah, you're not always reading scriptural items all the time. However, if somehow or another you want to, as it were, do some of this cleansing, well, that's where you go. Now, you also need to be careful, because you need to be awake. And I think I've said this many times. If I read the Bible, if I read the Gita, if I read Buddhist texts, if I read Zen stories, I don't even have to read all four different. The both the Old and the New Testament in their storytelling are contradictory, and there are no lack of skeptics and doubters who would say, well, look at the Bible, look at how contradictory it is. And yep, absolutely. It was written by a whole bunch of different people. It was written by, again, I'll stick with the New Testament right now, written by people, minimally 80 years after the facts. And I got news for you, kiddies. At my age, I don't remember last week, and I certainly am not going to remember 80 years ago. One, I haven't been around for that long, but two, you're talking about things being passed on. However, the essence, the marinade, well, you're going to get comments on this one, kid. The essence, what you're bathing in there, and I told the story and raised the concern about brainwashing, which is certainly much more of a concern for people than I would ever thought. But people literally will stay away from things because they don't want to be brainwashed, or at least don't want to have their mind changed. And nobody can brainwash you if you have strength. Now, if you're very weak, as we've talked about before, that's another story. But in any event, all of what we're talking about, all of this tofu marinade, is a way of having this outer cleanliness, this ceremonial cleanliness, help to flush away. I believe in the labors of I always go Hercules, so that's Hercule Poirot, which we'll get a second. In the labors of Hercules, the cleaning of the Aegean stables, which was to be, they're all impossible tasks, but he happens to be pretty clever, diverts a river into it, and that river flows and cleans out the stables. Now you have to ask yourself, are the labors of Hercules just about some guy who really did this? Or is this a way of pointing, as Joseph Campbell would often say in the Power of Myth, is this a way of getting in there and getting the inner organ of mind, the heart and the mind, cleaned out? Does it matter? Does it matter if the tale is true or not? And from a purely physical standpoint, it probably isn't. But that's not what it's for. Okay? You can take your rolling pin and hit an intruder who comes into your house over the head and knock him out. It's not what it's for. It can be used that way, but it's not what it's for. And so I think, getting caught up, here we are talking about ceremonial purification, being acquitted of sin, if you will, and saying, well, it doesn't hold up to a court of law. It isn't that level of law. It's at a different level. Okay, so many things, but let's just keep it really simple and say, not everything that is written in Scripture is meant literally. In fact, the less literal it is, the better chance it has of doing what it's intending to do, which is getting past the analytic mind. Okay? Because the analytic mind says, stop, I've got to examine this thing in detail. Well, it's kind of like picking apart, starting to cut limbs off of people and opening them up and pulling things out. They stop being a person at that point. And all of these words and all of these talks, it's not just me, anybody else who you find doing this, once you've dissected something down to that level, it is just, it's not the same thing as it started out to be. So I think I think that point kind of came across in this. and hopefully does explain, why does purity come back again on this list of godly qualities. And I consider it rather a sign of hope. If your heart, we talked about, hard-hearted, hard-headed, in that, how do you get out of it? And there's other ways. And one of them is the company you keep, what you listen to, what you see, what you hear, what you taste, what you smell, which to some people say, well, that's ridiculous. But it may not be. So, as always, we take a break at this point. I take a break for a few seconds. Think about what's just been said here. Look at these words a little bit. For you watching the video, I give it a couple of seconds. It says part 2. So, for you, in a couple of seconds, we'll be back. Okay? Hello, and welcome back to part 2 of this video, where we are looking at purity from verse 3 of chapter 16 of the Bhagavad Gita. Now, as was mentioned in part 1 of this, we had already looked at this word, but as I hope has become clear in the previous 25 minutes of this video, that we are looking at purity in a slightly different way, almost as cleanliness and purification, an action of helping, as it were, clean out the inner being. Now, before I hit the start button on here, I was singing there's a song called Green Fields. Once there were green fields, and you say, okay, well, why? Because and again, I can only speak from my experience in either being a programmer in an IT project or manager of IT professionals, but the golden ticket, if you will, of being assigned to the project. Everybody wants to work on the new project. Nobody wants to work on maintenance. Everybody wants to work on the new project. Okay. For various reasons, and I leave you to look that up on the internet. But a lot of the new, and not only a new project, but a greenfield project. A greenfield project it's wide open. This is not something we've done before. It's pure. It's clear. It's the words on this. It's open. It is full of potential. It is full of possibility, and that's something of what this is pointing to. And I think probably more than any other word that we've looked at so far, this second use of purity is got to be the ultimate in being a pointer, right? I point to the moon, I point to here, because it would be hard to describe what exactly it is that either we need to do or how we know we're there. Well, I think how we know we're there goes back to the first videos. You start to see a change in the person, how they act. They don't come home and scream at their spouse every other day. I'll be generous on that. They are kind and considerate and compassionate and everything else that we've talked. So there's, how that happens, how we get to that open, that green field, this pure and cleansed state is going to be different for everybody. It depends upon where you are. Now, in all of these, in every single one of these videos, and I may not have said this at the beginning videos, because in fact, if you look, I look at those first couple of videos, I was like, whoa, once you kind of get a little bit of used to the format and reading through this, then you begin to see how these things work. But however they work, and I've said it before in these are just offerings. These are just, here's what's read, here's what it says. None of this works. You cannot get to a clear, open, pure, virtuous, undefiled, a couple of other ones, unsullied, undefiled, innocent. You don't get to that state unless you see some benefit in that. And how that happens, that's pure grace, but I've told you that there's plenty of it, but you got to be willing. So the actual methods of purification, even if you went to religious ceremonies, the actual methods, the actual ceremonies differ, and sometimes widely, from religion to religion. But the aim is the same, this purification, this greenfield stuff. But none of it is doable without your consent. And how do you get to there? You see it, you hear it, you smell it, you taste it. Whatever it is, something gets in there and can start the process. But the process can always be thwarted by you. That power that we talked about in the last couple of videos, that's the power to say yes or the power to say no. It may not be that clear when we're talking about it, when in our day-to-day actions, but we're making choices. And those choices are based upon the direction that we feel is most useful to us. Now, most useful to us, for most people, means, oh, it's useful to me. And even though people get married and have children, it doesn't mean that their world has opened up anymore, despite the fact that they have at least another being, and possibly other beings, children's, and possibly pets. And you may have a household full of people, but you can also not be caring or concerned about any of them because you're still concerned about me. Now, one of the things, hopefully, that marriage, love, one of the things that should be bringing is, oh, I've got another person. It helps open it up. I mean, that's one of the benefits of not just, sitting by yourself watching TV all day long. It broadens the world. It opens it up. It gives possibilities. And I think maybe that's the way I've been looking for. How are we describing this? I call it Reflections on the Bhagavad Gita. I think the next series I may call the same. But maybe it should be called Possibilities of Life. Possibilities of lifting up, of getting to a bigger place, of getting to the green fields. That's the, it's really, I'm just going to dive into a practical method. The house that we purchased up in New Jersey was right about the time that this old house was starting up, and then there was these shows, and it was like, yeah, we need an old house. You know how to build them then, and what have you. Well, I got news. Once you move into an old house, you better have a pretty good bank account. What was it, Tom Hanks in the Money Pit? It eats up a lot, and it's tougher to do because you have to work within the existing framework. This is why it's difficult to work with some people at work, because they're not moving out of their framework. Okay, now, much easier and much quicker as I drive here back and forth every day. I'm amazed at the speed. This whole new section of, I don't know if it's going to be over 55 housing or low income housing. Stuff's going up like, every day you come in and there's another set of these buildings. Why? Well, one, they are to a plan, but more important, they're brand new. You don't have to preserve anything. If you're trying to work, in an old house that has old wiring or plumbing or whatever, it is much more difficult than just destroying that. And I've seen that around here too, where people have enough land. It was a really nice, again, cute old farmhouse. One day the bulldozer just took it down and they started building another house a little further back on the property. Way easier to do that. again, you need to have the money. Now, fortunately for us as human beings, we don't, to get out of our, whatever that state is, whatever that locked in, I ain't, by God, this is me, and I'm pounding because, you can't slap people to wake them up, okay? I'm pounding to say, if you want to get out of this locked in your head, by God, it was good enough for my grandfather and my father, and I ain't changing anything. Well, unfortunately, the world around you changes, and if you're trying to, I think it's just kind of hysterical around here. I mean, again, I've said I live out in the Amish area. There's still people driving horse and wagons. Well, okay. And if that's the way you're interpreting things and stuff, no one to stop you from doing it. I happen to think it's, especially in light of seeing the Amish people run into the friend has a barn, and on Saturday, because Sunday's the day of rest, on Saturday all the Amish ladies go running over to the barn. Why? Because that's where the refrigerators and freezers are. They keep all their meats and stuff in there. Can't keep it in the house because that's against the rules. So, I mean, leaving that sort of hypocrisy aside, you, as I've said before, and I'll say it again, you can do anything you want, But if somehow or another the idea has gotten to you that you're living a rather limited life, or a rather impure or a sullied life, or whatever the words are there, and you're looking for a little clean out, I mean, sometimes the best way is just go for it full throttle, It's like, yeah, let me take a look at what's out there. Let me see if I can be a little more compassionate to those around me. Let's see if I can practice, the first thing we said is stop lying, okay? Let's see if we can stop lying so we can practice getting to the truth, and so on and so forth. So we are clearly, when we talk about purity, the second use of purity, it hasn't, or I don't think I want to say it hasn't. We have our inner being. And, not everybody's the devil incarnate. We have our light and we have our darkness in there. And if it has some or another hit you that maybe a little more light might make things better for those around you, this is what I see as being, and I always say I see, and I always wish, I would love to see somebody, I want to see a comment, oh, by the way, I've done this, here's another point of view. And of course the second one I always ask for is, no, I think we should be mean and dishonest and steal and murder and stuff like that. That series of video, it'd be an interesting little argument, but but whatever the case may be, this is another point of view, another way. And on all of these things, it has to appeal to you. If it doesn't appeal to you, and if it's like, nope, dishonesty is the only way to go, that's what everybody else does today, well, okay, have fun. That's all I can say, have fun. I think there might be a few people trying to stop you from doing that, but that's a whole other story. All right, so I think we've kind of beat that one to death at the end here with the kind of the cleansing, that it is possible to reach that state where purity of being, where purity of heart, where that gracefulness and love and compassion is just part of your being. And at least, again, in my opinion, some of what we see here is the suggestion for how to get there. And again, not contradictory to what was said about what comes out of your heart. What comes out of your heart, and what comes out of your mouth is what's in your heart. And I would suggest that this second usage of purity is really geared towards people who is like, yeah, I'd like to clean up, I'd like to clean up my act, right? I mean, this is why I say the grace is raining down continually. You don't even have to go 2 inches, and you don't need Sanskrit. You can be in English. It's all out there. I'm sure there's other phrases, but every time I do one of these videos and then these words come by, it's like, yeah, it's out there, plain as day, okay? Do we pick it up? No, we'd rather be mean and rotten and keep to ourselves. And why, again, I don't know, but that's how we act. This is also a lead-in, because I got news for you people. The next video is absence of hatred. And I may have to do 10 breathing exercises before I get to that one, because really, right before this absence of hatred, we're talking about the method for dispelling that sort of hatred that we all have in our hearts. Okay? So whether you believe any of this or not is irrelevant. As I say, these are suggestions for how to clear the decks, how to. I think that's Marianne Esposito on Ciao Italia used to say that when, in between, she would okay, we got to clear the decks here because we're going to go on to the next thing. It's why we start these videos with that pause in there. You will only have a jumbled mess if there's not a chance to take a breath, clear it out, clean it out, because the mind is powerful, extremely powerful. And in fact, it's so powerful, it's what we use all of the time for everything, even in matters of the heart. We analyze, well, what's in it for me? Nothing. There's nothing in it for you. Now go out and love somebody. Okay? There's nothing in it for you. Now, if that sends you frightened and running, yeah, these videos aren't for you. But if you have gotten to the point where you've been able to clear out the junk and go, yeah, there's nothing in it for me, but so what? There's something in it for those around me, those who have to, as I said, those who have to be your so-called loved ones who have to put up with all your stuff. Alrighty, yeah, there's me. That may be the title for I'm trying to get the website going. Purity of heart, purity of being. Maybe it's nope. There's nothing in it for you. Now, of course, you're not going to get a big lineup for that, but you know what? You sleep better at night. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think that that's probably about as much as can be said on this subject, at least from where I am. If I go back and I watch the whole video, it usually brings up other things. And as I said, unfortunately, I don't have an audience here. I mean, you can't even, I don't know what the numbers of people that you could get together is. It would be way better if there were people listening to this and could ask questions right away, because that's again, it's more alive. Okay, it's more there. You're more awake. You're with it. It's as it's happening. But we don't have that. Certainly, you can leave something in the comments. I'd say try to be good, but I don't think people have the strength to be good right now. But that's where it is. So that was it for purity, the second one. As I said, I'm going to have to think. I may have to even take a break from these videos, because the next one up, not malice, absence. That's interesting. Adroha is coming up. Absence of hatred. And maybe a little prayer now and then wouldn't hurt either. All right, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy. You need to take another break. Don't forget, there's plenty of cute cat videos out there. Until next time.